Frances Moore, the mother of Natalie, grandmother to Hannah, and grandmother-in-law to Teresa, has been a fan of Jane Austen since she was 16 years old and first saw the 1940 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. And throughout her life, she often rented the 1995 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice on her birthday as a gift to herself.
On my birthday, I would go to the video store and get out the 1995 version and not watch the whole thing in all day, but watch quite a bit of it. That was my birthday treat.
You didn't?
I did. That was my secret. I suppose because that was a day that you could indulge yourself and with no one around in the house. So, and every so often, I have favourites I rewatch, but not as a group.
No, we don't. I don't think we ever come together and watch it, but we do talk about them. Like I know that Mum does not care for the Keira Knightley version.
No.
Things like that. So we definitely we've discuss it, but not. I don't think we as adults have ever sat and watched it together.
I remember talking about the Persuasion one when that came out, when everyone was talking about that one.
Yes.
Though she didn't read Austen's novels in school, watching her favorite adaptation brought her to all of Austen's books as she fell in love and found comfort in discussing an affinity with Elizabeth Bennet, especially with her walking friends, and eventually her daughter and granddaughters. Led by Mum's example, the women in her family have all come to find enjoyment in Austen in different ways, rooted in a shared love of literature, unity and sisterhood, and recognition of powerful women. Natalie, Frances's daughter, discovered Austen at a young age through an abridged version of Pride and Prejudice, which her mother put in her Christmas stocking, though she didn't read the rest of Austen's novels till her adulthood. Throughout her youth, Natalie remembered watching Austen adaptations with her mother as a treat that was meant for just her and her mother, separate from the men in her family, creating a bond grounded in a shared love of Austen. When Natalie raised her own children, she introduced Austen to her daughter Hannah. Following the lead of their mother and grandmother, Hannah and Natalie watched the 1995 Pride and Prejudice adaptation together as it became the beginning of Hannah's love of Austen. Her passion for Austen was further enhanced by receiving Sense and Sensibility from her mother, the first Austen book she read. Teresa, wife of Hannah's brother, discovered Austen in a different way. Originally from India, Teresa came across Austen in her grade 12 English class, where she studied the iconic scene from Pride and Prejudice where Darcy and Bingley enter the ballroom at Meryton. Teresa was immediately drawn to Elizabeth Bennet, the way she carried herself as a character, and remembered thinking that she wanted to grow up and be like her.
First time that I encountered Jane Austen was in my year 12 English class, and it was just like one chapter, and it was the scene where Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley is coming to their hometown, and then the ballroom scene. That was just one chapter that we had for studying, and I don't know, I just really liked the character Elizabeth Bennet. I just I really love her, and I can say that she is that I really want to be.
Oh,
yeah. I really love her character. She is good. She's really confident, and she's independent.
Later in her life, Austen served an additional purpose, connecting her with her husband's family. As the Moores welcomed Teresa into their family, they bonded over Austen at family dinners and discussed different perspectives about the novels and many adaptations. Though each member came to Austen in her own way, her novels and influence created a bond within the family embedded in a shared recognition of the power and distinctiveness of Jane Austen's work. My name is Samantha Holland, and I studied Jane Austen at Lehigh University, working with Hadley Ake and Ashley Witkowski in the Jane Austen Research Group dedicated to demonstrating the power of Austen as a writer, woman, and influential figure. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak with the Moores, an Australian family that has a special relationship with Jane Austen, her works, and her legacy. Frances Moore, Natalie Moore, Teresa Wilson, and Hannah Sutherland explained what the great author means to them and how she cultivates their bond. In this special episode of Jane Austen and the Future of the Humanities, the Moore family share insights on how Austen operates as a resource for female relationships as well as the importance of her stories to their lives.
When we went down to the conference last November and we were all in the car, Mansfield Park was the one we were really talking about, I think.
Yes.
And things, and Mrs. Bennet, and how we'd all mostly came around to a different opinion of her instead of we could see her perspective on. She had 5 daughters to marry and no one was paying attention to the problems. And so, that was the first time we were all together in a way.
All 4 of us talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's like you've read them separately
Right.
and watched them separately. And then when you do come together, it turns out you have this common thread.
Yeah.
As the Moores recognized their growing affinity for Austen, Frances, a frequent attendee of Jane Austen Society events, introduced the idea that the rest of her family might join her. Once the women decided to attend altogether, they made an event of it, sewed costumes, and connected their love of Austen. Natalie commented that each of the women enjoyed Austen in private and in their own way, but the conference preparation brought something new to the stories as they talked about the novels and heard her family's differing perspectives. On the car ride to the event, the women engaged in heated discussions on Austen characters, namely Mrs. Bennet, and recognized this was the first time they all sat down and talked about Austen. It united them, although they all had different perspectives. The women saw value in attending an Austen event, but saw spending time together as the most important part, as preparations for dressmaking and hairstyling became the focal point of their conversations at home. When Hannah brought up the idea of dressing in costume for the event, Natalie was curious if it would be a challenge for Teresa, as she was unfamiliar with her sewing skills. But Teresa ended up surprising her family and her own mother in India with the success she had making a dress. Through Austen, the women were able to learn new things about one another and grow closer as a family. Teresa offered a different perspective on Austen from the rest of her Moore family, because in her family, she grew up as the only one who's an Austen fan, whereas the Moores grew up surrounded by her influence. Teresa even bought her mother a translated version of Pride and Prejudice preceding the Jane Austen Society event, so her family in India could know what she was attending and understand her love for the author.
I think we just like started talking about Jane Austen when we were just like going for the conference. So I think I'm not like really into like the Jane Austen thing because I'm the only one that's reading my family back in India.
Natalie's perspective differs notably, as she was aware of Austen because of her mother's obsession throughout her entire life. Natalie first saw the function of Austen in her family as a bit of a joke, where her father would often refer to Austen as Mum's little thing, and would not take it as seriously as he would a sporting event. However, Natalie and her father began to realize the weight and importance of Austen, which has greatly elevated the status of Austen in her family, as they all came to see the joy, influence, and genius she offers.
Dad would make jokes of it, like it was Mum's little quirky, funny thing.
Yes.
And you correct me if I get this wrong, but I think it has moved from that, where I think he's realized that, and I don't know if this is terrible actually, that I feel maybe it's realizing that so many other people are into it, that it's validated it, and because he hasn't read any, but he's watched something with you, and I think his viewers shifted.
It's shifted.
As Natalie said, her father realized eventually that it's more than a frivolous love story being told. Similarly, Natalie came to realize how big a role Austen plays in their family, as she frequently comes up in family dinner conversations. And although the men in her family have never read any of her novels, they know much about her and her stories through the women in their family. Frances's comment on her husband as her Mr. Darcy reflects one way in which Austen's influence has affected both the men and women of the Moore family, as she sees no greater value than a reflective man who can admit he's wrong and make real change.
I would like to share something because it makes my husband Neil sound like he is a competitive man.
Yeah.
But in my mind, in a way, he sounds funny saying this public because I've said it to him. He's my Mr. Darcy because what I like about Mr. Darcy and what Jane Austen gives to him or creates in him, a reflective man. A man who's willing to make changes to see where he's been wrong in the past and admit he's wrong. And it's quite emotional for me, but that's my Mr. Darcy. So, sorry.
No, it's fine. I can't reach the tissues now.
Yeah, no, I'm right.
Throughout the course of the family's involvement with Jane Austen, they have developed an understanding of the importance of specific moments in her novels which they are drawn for one personal reason or another. Frances, for example, has found herself thinking throughout her life, what would Elizabeth Bennet do?
I think for me, often, I don't do this often, but I might think, what would Elizabeth Bennet do? Or how would you do this? Or Anne Elliot, the characters, like the strength of character in them I think you can look to them, even though they're fictional characters, and take a measure of how to behave sometimes.
All of the women see immense power in Elizabeth Bennet, and Teresa often reflects on the scene in Pride and Prejudice where Elizabeth confronts Lady Catherine, as it is one of her favorite in Austen's work. As a big Elizabeth Bennet fan, Teresa admires her determination to stick who she is and stand up for herself, despite speaking to someone from a higher social class than her, showing that she doesn't let arbitrary things like titles stand in the way of what is right. Through Elizabeth Bennet, Teresa recognized the valuable trait of self-determination and the recognition of the power of liberating conversations. Besides the famous Elizabeth Bennet, the more women realize the strength of all of Austen's heroines. One of Natalie's favorite characters is Fanny Price of Mansfield Park. Her favorite Fanny moment is when she declines Henry Crawford's proposal, as Natalie admires the strong will of her character and the beauty of watching women hold their own in important decision-making processes. For Natalie, Fanny Price shows how women use the strength of their autonomy as a powerful force in their lives. Similarly, Hannah often thinks of Mansfield Park and its commentary on class throughout the characters' interactions with one another. Hannah finds great value in Mary Crawford as an independent woman worthy of comparisons to Elizabeth Bennet. Hannah recognized that the Crawfords were written as less attractive people, but she finds much to admire in Austen's depiction of Mary Crawford, as she isn't afraid to speak her mind. Though Hannah often thinks of Mansfield Park, Persuasion is her favorite novel and holds a special place for Frances as well. Out of all the famous Austen moments, Frances spoke specifically about Anne Elliot's conversation with Captain Harville. Frances discusses this dialogue as a rare moment for Anne to finally speak her mind, give her opinions, and defend herself. The gratifying moment leads Captain Harville to credit Anne with a thinking brain, which shows that he respects her opinions. The conversation demonstrates the power of female intelligence and presents gender dynamics in a modern, adaptable way, changing how women view giving their opinion and transforming it in a way that gains respect. As the women of the Moore family discussed, analyzed, and reflected upon Austen's novels and characters, they discovered new ideas and connections with one another, and by going back to revisit the stories. The women have unanimously agreed that their opinions of Mrs. Bennet have changed from when they first immersed themselves in Pride and Prejudice.
Maybe my girls are smarter and come to it earlier, but I feel like as a young person reading them and thinking, ugh, like Mrs. Bennet's so annoying or hysterical or over the top, and then reading them later on and thinking, we have discussed this, she's right to be hysterical. Their housing situation is really precarious. Like if Mr. Bennet dies, I thought, no wonder this woman's hysterical, and then getting no validation from anyone else about this real concern. These women are right to be anxious.
And Teresa comments on how the severity of their housing situation would prompt extreme worries about securing marriage for her daughters.
It's just like there's like a societal standard for a daughter, like growing up during that era, and then Elizabeth and her sisters have not done anything of it. And then she was making a point, oh, this is really bad. You guys are like really like open to the society, like getting them ready to get married and stuff.
She also reflected on how Mrs. Bennet's concerns over the situations are brushed aside as another indicator of her hysterical characterization, when in reality she's the only one taking it seriously, and no one is listening to her, reminding us how women's struggles are often belittled. Similarly, Hannah expressed a change of heart on Lydia Bennet and how she used to dislike her because of the ways the filmic adaptations presented her. As she read the novel and grew as a reader, she recognized the great danger of Lydia's situation as a young woman who's taken advantage of by an adult. Hannah also pointed to the love and power that was able to blossom from the hardships of Lydia's situation, from the Bennet family and from Mr. Darcy, both of whom responded to the dangerous situation with the strength of love and family. The family specifically reflected on Darcy's role within the novel and sympathized with the uncomfortable nature of his introduction. They all commented on how our first impression of him might be unfair. When Natalie sees Mr. Darcy as socially awkward, Hannah characterized him as potentially neurodivergent, and together they agreed that his initial comments on Elizabeth stem not from disinterest or disrespect, but from a place of discomfort in a new place, prompting him to become anxious in an overwhelming atmosphere.
We did have this discussion as well, though. Our family, I know I talk a lot, but we're actually quite introverted. I do talk a lot, but I still find situations with new people quite challenging. And I suppose a more compassionate interpretation was Hannah, because we first experienced Mr. Darcy at the ball, and you think, what an arrogant person. But Hannah, I think it was you who said maybe he's just socially awkward. Like,
Yeah, I think maybe he's like, you could rate him as neurodivergent, and then judging him on his behavior at a ball with a bunch of strangers is maybe an unfair first meeting for him.
yeah, it's a little rough, isn't it? He's there, and he's not only is he new in town, but he's the guest of someone else who's new in town. Like there's no, yeah,
And there's all these women is out there.
That's right, and they are all shopping for husbands, and he's very perhaps more aware of that. With Mr. Bingley, he's so kind, always kindest interpretation of everyone,
But I don't, like, I think I come across quite badly in a group sometimes. Like, that would be a bad first meeting for me with people, so I can have sympathy for him.
As the Moores reflected on how their opinions about the beloved Mr. Darcy had changed, they also thought about his relationship with Elizabeth that merits reconsideration. They spoke about their sense that Elizabeth first falls in love with Mr. Darcy when she sees his grand estate at Pemberley, which they first thought of as shallow. But through several revisits to the story, the women have concluded that what made Elizabeth truly fall for him was the way he treats his staff and his family, which completely shifts the heroine's perspective on Darcy. As the Moores think and rethink about Austen's work, what it offers to them, they gain insights into the stories they love through the family they love. When reflecting on the shared love of Jane Austen, the Moores spoke about how this bond has grown and what makes family important to them through the lens of Austen. Frances comments that it didn't happen consciously, and that she said that through Austen, she sees families are different, including her own. By analyzing Jane Austen's role in their family, Natalie told me that Austen shows that family dynamics haven't changed in hundreds of years, and that complexities in Austen's family inform the complexities of contemporary families. Natalie explained how she doesn't want to recreate a family dynamic similar to the Bennet family, including the disgrace associated with Lydia's elopement, reminding us that while Austen's stories continue to influence our understanding of family, their depictions are not meant to be simply emulated in the modern day. As the Moores thought about Austen's depictions of family, they reflected on contemporary representations of families. Natalie believes that the concept of marrying a family is reflected in modern Western culture, and that the decision of marriage should not be inherently hinged upon family, but in reality it plays a big part and should be acknowledged. Frances spoke about Austen's treatment of familial problems and the ways we seek support from one another. Families still protect their members in times of need, and Austen teaches us the importance of unwavering support within families, a trait no doubt to be emulated. Through Austen's portrayal of families, the Moores see the complexities within their own familial relationships, recognize that families are not perfect. They found great value in analyzing the strengths and challenges of familial relationships, both in Austen and how she can teach us about the modern family. The Moores continually thought about Austen's heroines and how they might inform women's journeys through life. A character near to Frances's heart is Elizabeth Bennet, as she fell in love with her characterization in adaptations and sees her strength as a powerful resource for women. Frances indicated that Elizabeth is a character she'd like to emulate because her personality traits are admirable. In particular, the ability to be polite to one another while still speaking her mind is a trait Frances admires and believes Elizabeth represents perfectly. As Frances grew into adulthood, she began to find increasing value in Anne Elliot of Persuasion. Unlike Elizabeth, Anne is not outspoken but often ignored within the bounds of her own story. Frances sees this as a powerful example because while Anne is overlooked, she is still respected and deserves recognition as an esteemed Austen heroine. As the family reflected on the main characters of Austen's world, Natalie thought more carefully about Charlotte Lucas and what she had to show us about the strength of her character. Natalie challenged her own initial ideas on Charlotte, recalling how she first didn't understand why she would marry Mr. Collins. But now she respects the strength she had to make that decision. Natalie now believes that her decision was intelligent and brave, because it was probably the best option for her and for her family's future and finances. When the Moores think of Austen's heroines, each woman sees value in every female character because they hold power to teach us something important about ourselves and growing into womanhood. As the Moores spend increasingly more time with Austen, they see the strength of sisterhood and the bonds between women as the backbone of her stories, explaining how Austen is a tool for the formation of female friendships. Frances concluded that sharing the Jane Austen Society conference with her family was something she never thought would happen. She was very grateful for the women in her family and appreciated the time they shared at the Austen conference. Further, Frances said that sharing Austen with her family has been a gift to her, because through Austen, a unique bond has formed, providing Hannah, Teresa, Natalie, and her a constant outlet for discussion. Through Jane Austen, the Moores found a common ground that strengthens their bonds as women, From making dresses to debating the ideas of Austen's novels, the joy sparked by collaborating with other women, the Moore's ongoing engagement with Jane Austen shows the strength of womanhood is timeless, and the Moore's love of Austen has now connected multiple generations of women.